everyone. Welcome to Motoveto82. I'm a motorcycle enthusiast, and on this channel I share my experiences with you all. In today's video I'm going to be performing the 1100 mile maintenance cycle on my GSXR 600. I have timestamped each section of the video in the description below for those of you looking for specific parts and want to skip ahead. So before I get started, I just wanted to say that I'm not a mechanic. Most of what I know I have learned from others, mainly my father. He was a hot rod head, so he was always working on cars and whatnot, so I learned quite a bit from him. Or I have learned, by reading and looking at maintenance manuals and whatnot. But with that said, I enjoy the interaction and the comments with you all. But there might be times where I just don't know the answer to your questions. But I'll do my best to, at least point you in the right direction. My only hope is that you get something out of these videos. I don't have an ego, so if there's something that I say that is wrong or there's a better way of doing it, by all means, let me know in the comments below. I'm always open to learning new things or better ways of doing things. So, with that being said, hopefully you can learn how to do these maintenance cycles without having to take it to a dealership or mechanic. There are some honest mechanics out there, but as a whole, you're just gonna save a lot more money by doing these services yourselves. And they're really not that difficult, to be honest with you. I guess the most difficult one that you will ever do is checking the valve clearance. That's really the hardest it's gonna get, to be honest. But aside from that, like I said, pretty easy. So if you haven't already, I would recommend for you to find the service manual for your motorcycle. Suzuki generally has one already, but if not, you can do third-party vendors. Haynes service and repair manual is a good one. I have it myself, and if I'm ever stuck on anything, I always reference back to that manual. So if you're mechanically inclined and you can follow directions, you shouldn't have any issues following along. It's pretty clear, and like I said, if you're mechanically inclined, it's going to make sense to you, and you'll figure it out. So before you get started with the maintenance, it's always a good idea to rinse off your motorcycle, blow off any dust you might have in the engine area. That way you don't get any dirt inside the engine whenever you're either checking the spark plugs or opening it up. Also, you want to put your bike on stands. It's not necessary, but it makes it a whole lot easier when you do that. Of course, you want to take off your fairings, seat, and lift your tank, and get ready for the actual maintenance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight off the service manual. I'm going to work down the list as what is recommended for the service manual for the 1100 mile cycle. Keep in mind that these are just suggestions by Suzuki. Depending on how hard you ride your motorcycle or your style of riding, these cycles might have to be shorter. Also keep in mind that this is a K7 GSXR 600. For the most part, it's going to be the same for newer models, but there might be a few things that are missed. These bikes are, I guess, low tech, so you don't have all the new technology that the newer bikes have. So there might be some extra things that you might have to take care of on the newer models. But as a general rule of these are the, I guess, the important things. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is replace the air filter. There are some screws that you're going to have to take off to take the top and just take the air filter out and replace it. Using the original Suzuki OEM air filter. There's all kinds of air filters that you can install, but you know, the engineers engineer these bikes for a particular airflow, so I'm just going to stick to the OEM air filter. You can get it for about 40 bucks. It's not that expensive. 40 or 50 bucks, I don't remember what I paid for. There we go. So before I change the air filter, I'm just going to clean everything in there. So obviously you want to use a dry rag. So here's the new air filter. It'll have the up logo here, and it's 0180. So what I do is just drop it in there, and that's really it for the air filter. One last thing is down here there's a plug. I don't know if you can see it. Sometimes water accumulates in there, so you just want to make sure that you drain it. It'll come off. So this is the little cap I was talking about. Sometimes there's fluid in there. As you can see, it's dry, which I think that's a good thing. If there's no fluid in there, you can see bugs and stuff. Alright, so once you do that, you just put the little ring back on there and you're good to go. So now it's just a matter of putting the screws back on. As you can see, it was definitely time to replace this air filter. It's all dirty. There's kinds of debris in between. Okay, so now to check the spark plugs, we have to remove the actual air box. So there's 4 butterfly valves, and at the base of each butterfly valve is basically just a cylinder that goes up, that goes into the air box.
So at the base, there's basically a clamp that tightens up the air box onto those cylinders or the butterfly valves, where the cylinders where the butterfly valves are housed. I don't know the proper name for those, but trust me. So you have to unscrew those clamps so you can take it off. Then, of course, you have to leave this hose unclamped. You have to let the sensors unclamp, and then there's also another little hose back here that you have to unclamp. So you're gonna need butterfly valves. I'm sorry, needle nose pliers to get that one off. So you just let go of the clamp there, and then like I said, you're gonna have to find the clamps in here. It's a little tough to show you on camera. I would have to literally take the whole tank off and get a view this way, and I don't think it's necessary because it's not that complicated. So trust me, there's all you're gonna need is a screwdriver, and once you do it before, it's gonna be pretty easy to do it again. I think they're loose enough, so hopefully that's enough. Oh man, I forgot to. There's also a nut right here that I completely forgot about that you have to take off. I think it's 10 millimeters. Yeah, it's a 10 millimeter nut. All right, so now I think it should come off. All right, so as you can see, the whole air box comes off. And then kind of just reorganize everything here, all the wires and hoses that you took off. All right, so once you get the air box off, you're gonna want to locate the spark plugs. So the spark plugs are on top of the head here, and there's 4. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and you want to disconnect the coil. So each coil has a connector. You want to take those connectors off. And it's gonna be hard for you to lose them, because you know they kind of just go right there to each one. So once you do that, you just want to check each spark plug. So you kind of have to, it's hard, but you have to get each coil, it kind of just twist and pull up at the same time, and they'll pop off. So these are the coils. This is where the electrical connection to the harness goes, and this is where the spark plug, the top of the spark plug goes. You kind of just want to inspect it, make sure it doesn't look cracked or burnt or anything like that. Also, you want to check the connectors here, make sure that they don't look bent. So this one looks pretty good. So now we have to take the spark plug out, and then we need to get the tool for that. So the tool I use came with the toolkit for the bike. So I believe you can also use like a 5/8 socket, and all you do is put it in there. You twist it till it locks. Socket there. So there we go, finally got it off. So what you want to do is check the spark plug, make sure that it's not wet, because if it's wet, that means that you need a hotter spark plug. And if it's like white, almost burnt looking, that means that your spark plug is too hot and you need to go down. Of course, you're gonna see some use in there, but you know, this looks just fine. It looks like it's fine. The other thing you want to check is the distance between the electrode and this little flap here, and there's little tools that you can use to check the length. And it should be between 0.7 and 0.8 millimeters. And basically, you just slide it through. So you start at the very end, and then you just slide it, slide it, slide it. You get it to the right length, and you might have to push it a little bit. But once you check to make sure that it's the right gap between the electrode and the thing. The other thing is just to check for carbon deposits. Make sure that you know, there's not a lot. What I like to do is I use a wire brush and just kind of gently just brush off the tips here, and then once that's ready, you're good to go. All right, so this spark plug looks good. No need to change it. Of course, if I just changed it the last maintenance cycle, so I wasn't expecting to have to replace it. But if it gets to the point where it's looking pretty bad, or like I said, there's a lot of carbon deposit, or it's really white or wet, that's a good indication that you might have the wrong spark plug in there, or it's not working as it should be working. So once you're done, you just put it back in and you're good to go. All right, and once you do one, it's going to be the same thing for each one. The only thing I would say is once you put in the cylinder over here, you don't want to tap on the top. You just want to push it down till it clicks, and then reconnect the connector, and that's good. So you would do that for each one, and that's it for that. While I have the airbox off, I'm going to check the throttle play because it's easier to see here.
So let's do that now. So throttle play, you want to have almost no play, like a tenth of a rotation here, if that. So this is normal. If you had more play, like let's say that, okay, well right there, it's engaging the throttle. I don't know if you can see it move. So, but if you had this amount of play and the throttle still wasn't moving, the valves here, or the throttle, then that means you have too much play in your throttle, and then you would just need to adjust the throttle play. Let me show you where that's at. So it's going to be on your left side of the bike. So left side of the bike, you see there? You see that circle turning? So there's an adjustment right here that you could make to tighten that up or loosen it up depending on what you need. And that's where you would make these adjustments right here to tighten up the throttle or loosen it up. So before putting on the air box, check that. That way, if you do need to make adjustments, like I said, it's easy for you to do right there and make those adjustments. But other than that, if there's no adjustments that need to be made, you would just put the air box back in and move on to the next thing. The next thing we're going to do is change the engine oil and the oil filter. And to drain the oil, you need to take this plug off here, and then the oil filter is there. So let's do that real quick. Just quick tip here before you get started, make sure that you warm up the engine pretty good, and then that way it'll all flow out. Now first you just want to crack it a little bit. And just slowly let it pour out so you don't make a mess. Alright, once you see that most of the engine oil has drained out, the next thing you want to do is drain the oil filter. And the oil filter is located right in this area right here. And same thing, you just want to slowly let it drip. That way you don't make a mess.
Alright, as far as the oil filter, I used the K&N. It's the KN 138. Make sure you put a little oil around the tube here. Rub it in and then just put it back in. So the next thing is to obviously fill it up with some oil. On the right side, there's a cap here. Here's where you fill it up. You want to 2.7 liters is what it takes. Quarts, I mean, not liters. And I like to use the Mobile 1 Racing 4T 10W40 oil. So I'll put 2 and a little bit, 2.5, a little over 2.5. So I just put my tool up here. Then you want to start your bike. Let it run for a little bit. Look for leaks and recheck the level again over here. Make sure that it's where it needs to be. So you want to let it run. Like I said, check for leaks, make sure there's no oil leaking. And then let it sit for a little bit. Check the oil level again. And if it needs to be filled to capacity, then you add a little bit more, and that would be it for the oil filter. For the oil change and filter. The next thing on the maintenance is to inspect the fuel lines. This is pretty easy. Basically, you see these lines here. These are the reserve, the extra if you put too much tank. So basically, just inspect these lines here. They go all the way down to the bottom. So you can actually pull them up if you like, but I don't recommend you do that. So basically just follow them all the way down, all the way down, all the way down. And they come out to where you change the oil. So they go on the left side, all the way across and down. Just make sure there's no cracks on these lines. And if these are damaged, not a huge deal, especially if it's damaged down here. If it's damaged up here, then yeah, you need to replace them, because that means there's going to be gas leaking on your engine, which could be a big issue. But mine look fine. They don't look brittle. They're still kind of elastic, so not going to worry about it. Then the next thing you need to inspect for your fuel line is this line right here. This is fuel pump, and this is the line that I guess, you know, your fuel pump pumps the line into
Yeah, so basically you just need to make sure that it's not brittle, it's not leaking, and just follow the line all the way up to here till it turns to aluminum. Make sure that there's no leaks, and if there was leaks, you would definitely smell gas. So yeah, just inspect those lines, make sure that there's no issue there. All right, the next thing you need to inspect is your idle speed. So what this means is whenever your bike's idling, it should be at a certain RPMs. So the RPM should be around 1300 at idle, plus or minus 300. So if, let's say that your bike is at 800 RPMs or 2000 RPMs, obviously that's out of range. So you would want to adjust your idle speed to make sure that you get it into that 1300 cushion. So if, let's say that you do have an issue and you need to adjust it, the left side of your bike, there's going to be a nut, and it's right there. So that's the nut you would adjust. I believe if lefty loosey, righty tighty. So if you go to the left, it should make your RPMs lower, and if you go to the right, it should make your RPMs higher. And it's a little bit tricky to do it, but it's manageable to do so. So yeah, this is where you would make that adjustment. Mine is fine, so I don't need to adjust it. It's just part of the maintenance to inspect it to make sure. And like I said, if you do need to make adjustments, this is the nut that you would adjust for the idle speed. So the next thing we would inspect would be the radiator hoses. So there's going to be some hoses on the left side and on the right side. So here you want to inspect this hose right here that goes all the way through here and in there. Basically, you just want to make sure that it's not brittle and that there's no leaks. To get in here, you would need a flashlight to kind of flashlight in there, but you can see where it connects, and if there is a leak, you would definitely be able to see it. The next hose would be here in the bottom. You would definitely want to make sure the connection's here. Same thing, make sure it's not brittle. And this connects over here to the water pump. And then there's another hose that goes on the lower end of the water pump. You definitely want to inspect this hose as well. This goes into the
engine block right here. So you check it from here to there, and then from here to the radiator. So those are the hoses you want to inspect. Once again, just make sure that they're not brittle and that they're not leaking. You would definitely be able to see if it was leaking. I guess the main thing is that they're not brittle. So let's check the right hand side. All right, so on the right hand side, you want to check this hose here. Same thing, make sure it's not leaking, that it's not brittle, and it connects all the way to the back there. It's kind of hard to see, but once again, you would need a flashlight to see in there. So make sure that's not leaking. Then you would also want to check this hose down here. Same thing, make sure it's not brittle. And then these hoses here, this is for your reservoir. And from the top here, that goes in. So these hoses, once again, make sure they're not brittle or leaking. And then obviously you want to check your reservoir. Make sure that there is some coolant in there. You also want to make sure it's not cracked. Make sure that the lid's on there tight, same with the radiator. And the fluid you would only change every couple years. Next thing you want to inspect is going to be your brake reservoir. You want to make sure that the hoses are fine, that it's not leaking any fluid. You also want to make sure that your brake is nice and tight. There's going to be a little bit of play, but it should be tight. This is your master cylinder here. Make sure that there's no fluid leaking anywhere there. And then you want to follow the hoses. Your brake hose all the way down, and then it breaks into two. There's a caliper on the right side, and then a caliper on the left side. So you want to follow each side. Make sure that there's no brake fluid leaking. The brake lines are pretty tough, so they shouldn't be, I guess, not brittle, but you want to make sure that they're tight, they're hard. Because once they start coming bad is when they start getting like a bulge or a bubble. That's when you know you need to replace your brake lines, because the brake lines there's a lot of pressure in here, so these are gonna be really hard. So there shouldn't be any play in these at all. Not brittle, but just hard. Make sure that it's not leaking. Make sure that your caliper is not leaking fluid. And then you want to do the same thing on the other side. You would follow the brake line to this side here. And same thing, make sure that it's not bulging and that it's not leaking. You want to check your caliper as well. And that's good to go. I recently had the recall for not recently, but 2 years ago, had the recall for the master cylinder, so they replaced the fluid. So I'm not going to replace the fluid till maybe next time around. So on the rear, you want to check. So this is the cylinder here for the brake. You want to make sure that it's not leaking anywhere around the cylinder. You want to check this line here. And on the caliper, make sure that there's no leaks as well. Same thing on the line here, just basically make sure that it's not bulging anywhere and that it's not cracked or leaking. And in the reservoir is up here. So this line up here is from the reservoir, and then from here it goes to the cylinder. But same thing, make sure that it's not leaking and that it's full. And it is here. Same thing, I'll replace the fluid when I do the front there. So that's what you would inspect. All right, so the next item you would want to inspect is your tires. So it's going to be the same for your front tire, so I'll just do my rear tire real quick. So basically there's going to be
you want to make sure that the thread is good and it's not used. So there's some markers. I don't know if you can see it. On every tire has these markers. So once the thread gets down to that's level with the markers, that's when you know you need to replace your tire. I don't know if you can see. Let me put some light on there. So right here. So obviously I don't do a lot of cornering. I live in Texas, so there's nothing but straight roads here. So on the sidewall here, as you can see, I have plenty of thread. On the center, I still have plenty of thread, but as you can see, it's not quite as much as on the sides here. And that's it. You know, you always also want to make sure that there's no nails or any tears to your tire. Of course, you want to check the air pressure as well, and that's all you would do for the tires. And same thing for the front tire. Next, the final thing you would do is your chain. You want to decrease your chain, and then you want to lube it. First, you would want to scrape off all the dust. You're gonna need a brush. Then you can get any old kind of chain degreaser. Just make sure that it's for chain and sprockets, and that it's oil ring safe. And as long as it's oil ring safe, you're good to go. And then you can get any chain lube, anything really works. All right, so the first thing you want to do is slowly just spray the chain. Just spray. You want to make sure, just get it all soaked. Basically, is what you want to do with the degreaser. And this is a messy process, so I kind of hate doing it. Oh man, my bike's been sitting. I haven't been riding it since the pandemic, so you can see. Or I don't know if you can see, but there's some rust on there. Shit, damn it. That sucks. And while you're doing this, also be taking a look at your sprocket teeth. Make sure that they're not too pointed, not dulled out, because you know, if it gets to that point where they're too sharp or they're just, the wear pattern is just uneven, you can easily spot a bad sprocket. Once it gets to that point, you know, that's a good indication that you might need to change your sprocket. But mine seems to be good at the moment. My chain is pretty new, so I'm kind of pissed off that I let it get to this point where it's rusting a little bit. Hopefully the oil rings aren't damaged, because that's when you really need to replace it once those oil rings are damaged. But hopefully we can salvage it. And of course, the other thing you want to check is the chain slack. You do it over here. Make sure that it's not too tight and not too loose. But I've already checked that, so mine's good to go. And if you would need to make any changes, obviously you would untie this nut here, and if it's too tight or loose, you would make adjustments here and kind of pull the tire back and forth. But like I said, I don't need to make those adjustments. Alright, so once you get your chain nice and soaked with the degreaser, you want to get your brush, and then you just want to start brushing away. So what I like to do, I mean, you can do it all sorts of ways. There's really no right or wrong way. What I like to do is kind of do this part here. So I just brush
all here. Then I turn till this top link gets to the bottom here, and then I do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. What I recommend is that you do it where the master link is. That way you know how many rotations you've done. And I like to do 2 rotations of cleaning, and then I'll spray it again, and then I'll get a towel and do it. But I'll show you. So basically just, this is all you do. Alright, so now that you've cleaned it off as best you can, you just use some lube. And that's all I do for my chain.
Another part of the maintenance cycle for the 1100 mile maintenance is to torque your bolts. This isn't something that I did on the video. Not only did I forget, I didn't think it was necessary to show you guys how to torque bolts, but I do think it's important, you know, because you don't want to be riding down the road with bolts coming out of your bike. So here's a chart that has all the bolts that need to be torqued, and they're all numbered. And then on the right hand side it has the proper torque that you need to torque them with. And you know, if you use newtons, kilograms, or foot-pounds of torque, they're all there, so you can use whatever you use the most, or whatever your torque wrench has. So once again, on the left hand, or on the item column, you have all the bolts that need to be, or nuts that need to be torqued. They're all numbered, and on the right hand side you have the proper amount of torque that they need to be torqued. And the reason why they are numbered is because here in a second I'm going to show you some illustrations that pinpoint where on the bike they are. That way you can easily reference the bolt or the nut. So here on these illustrations you can, like I said, you know, get the nut or the bolt and torque it to its proper torque. Another thing that you should probably do on every maintenance cycle is lubricate pivot points on your motorcycle. Of course, we lubricated the chain, but there's also other pivot points that you should probably, like I said, every maintenance cycle lubricate. One would be the brake lever holder. Then another would be the brake pedal pivot and foot pivot on the right hand side for your brake, obviously. Then you want to lubricate your clutch lever holder. Then you want to lubricate the footrest pivot and the gear shift lever point. So that's two different points here, and then up there. You also want to lubricate your side stand pivot point, and like I already mentioned, of course, your chain.
Guys, that was it for the 1100 mile maintenance cycle. Of course, the last thing you would do is put all your fairings back on and put everything back into its original configuration, and that's it. You're done after that.